Hello, everybody. I am Patrick Daugherty, joined by Kyle Dvorchak. Welcome, Dvorchak. Welcome to our weekly waivers Q&A and Week 3 breakdown. We're going to talk about some of the biggest storylines from Sunday, but more importantly, give you a look ahead to yet another week on waivers. It's not the biggest week we've had all year, Kyle. It's actually kind of a quiet week, is it not? There is one person who stands out on waivers, someone who may have scored 4 touchdowns and rushed for over 200 yards on Sunday. Who is the top waiver wire pickup of week 4?
Yeah, top waiver wire pickup this week is easily Devon Achane. Achane, as we are now being told, it's called, going over 200 total yards from scrimmage, 4 touchdowns. He's an elite speedster in an offense that emphasizes that. I don't know if we're getting 22 touches every week, but he is the perfect waiver wire pickup for the rest of the season.
So even if he doesn't get 22 touches every week, the thing with Achane, that is going to take some getting used to. There's an unnatural pronunciation there. He's kind of like one of those big play wide receivers where you never want to count on like a lack of volume with a running back, but he's the kind of guy where even if it's a week where he gets 6 to 8 touches, 1 or 2 of those touches could be the ones that flip the real life game, that flip your fantasy football matchup. The Dolphins clearly know what to do with him. It was viewed as like a luxury pick when they took him in the 3rd round, but they knew where he fit in their offense, and injury made it take a while for them to fully unveil it. He was not active week 1. He barely played in week 2, but he was healthy and ready to go in week 3, Kyle. And that Broncos defense, it's not like it's going to be a good defense this year. It's not the worst in the history of the NFL. I think we can say that. I mean, unless it's just, and Sean Payton has usually never been party to bad defenses. There was one stretch in New Orleans, those down years where they went 7-9, like 3 or 4 straight years, that he was party to some bad defenses. But those are usually some fairly good defenses that Sean Payton is a party to. Even though he's an offensive mind, he usually finds the people to establish the kind of tone he wants on defense. And so it's not like we can just like write off this game from Devon Achane and the Dolphins because it was against like the worst defense ever. We're going to see the Broncos defense probably look pretty good this week against the Bears. And he's just, so as you know, so explain just some of the risk with Devon. The reward is self-evident. What is the risk with Devon? Because we're going to be unloading a waiver. He's already rostered in a lot of leagues, close to 50. So a lot of people are already on this, obviously. Some people have been on this since like June. Not in my league, blah, blah, blah. To the people who don't have him,
not in my league.
He is an all-time.
He's at 45%. Either 44 or 45% of Yahoo leagues. I'm sure in like the higher tier of more serious leagues, he's 80-90%, just some one-offs that cut him. But for the general listener, which is who I'm trying to speak to, is he's an elite. I think Danny Kelly from The Ringer, I hope I'm getting this reference right, I believe it was Danny Kelly, said he's like a Tyreek Hill at the running back position. Like he's, as Tyreek Hill is, he's undersized. I want to say he's 5'8" or 5'9", 188.
He is 5'8", under 200, under 190.
Yeah, I believe he clocked in at 188 at the combine. So he's like not at all built for even frankly 22 touches a game. I don't think I'd be shocked if that holds. It really won't. It's the fact that they also got Raheem Mostert, 7 catches and something like 15 or 16 carries. They had possession for the entirety of the game and could not stop moving the ball. They couldn't stop themselves if they wanted to. So you're not getting that. The risk is that he comes back to 12 touches a game. I think that's a pretty fair projection for him. Is maybe
10 to 12, I say, sounds fair to expect from Devon Achane.
Yeah, I'd project him for like 9 to 10 carries and 2 to 3 catches. Like the pass catching role was still given to Mostert. He had 7 targets, but Achane is a guy who, even if you don't designate him as your passing downs back, he's probably not a good pass blocker because he's 188 pounds. You want to design touches for him through the air as well. So 10 to 12 carries, 2 to 3 catches a game. That's relatively low for a guy you're unloading the FAAB clip on. You're getting more touches per game for a guy you unloaded the FAAB clip on out of Jerome Ford and Kyren Williams, who have been previous, like, this is the guy this week type of players. You're not getting Achane level of efficiency. I think it's scary to say this because it's such a high comp. He really is Tyreek Hill-esque at the running back position. And he's probably going to be used sort of like we saw Tyreek Hill was as a rookie. I believe it was his rookie season, where he's like used in a very unique and non-traditional way. And that makes our focused brains really not understand what to do with him. But the answer is, I for my money, I like this. Another one, I don't want to put these too lofty expectations out there. Mike McDaniel's the best coach in the NFL to me. I don't know.
I'm not sure about that, but we'll see. He's ascending.
I believe last year you told me there was no difference between Teddy Bridgewater and Tua Tagovailoa. He has turned that guy into the best statistical quarterback in the NFL.
I don't know if I said when I said, because I was out on Teddy early. I was out because Teddy is like Mr. Made of Glass. No offense to Teddy, where he's at the stage of his career where he can't appear in a game without getting hurt. So it sounds a bit extreme. I don't know if anyone can find the tape on that.
I know Denny said it, but I believe you agreed with him.
No, yeah, that doesn't actually sound like me, just to be totally honest.
No, it's a clip that Denny said that you probably just nodded and went, "Oh yeah." The words didn't come from your mouth, but I think you and most of us were like, Tua at his best is just like a game manager plus type of guy. We have to reevaluate that too. I think that is probably functionally incorrect, but like Tua is putting up Mahomes plus level numbers. I mean, he's the favorite by a pretty easy margin, surprisingly, to win the MVP at this point. Plurality favorite, not like a majority favorite. Something has to give here. You either have to say Tua is like a top 3 quarterback or McDaniel is a top 1 coach. Like there is something has to give. To me, Tua is not top 3. Do I think he's top 10? Probably. I think McDaniel, for my money, is number 1.
Well, the thing with McDaniel is he's clearly a top 2 to 3 play caller and like scheme designer right now. How that translates to being like the overall coach, because it wouldn't be the first time a play caller has risen and then maybe like not have been like quite an elite overall package as coach, but he's off to an extremely good. He almost won a playoff game with Skylar Thompson last year. That was against the Buffalo Bills. You did a good job explaining what people are getting into with Devin Achane. Just to the schedule, we're going to find out pretty quickly. It's the Bills this week. The total for that game will probably be pretty high, but the Bills have smothered 2 straight teams. They seem to be stabilizing on defense after a really weird finish to 2022. Pretty unimpressive week 1, actually, for the Bills defense. They're stabilizing. Then it's a Giants defense that has not looked as advertised through the first 2 weeks. The Panthers, then it tightens up. The Eagles, the Patriots, the Chiefs, week 10 bye. We'll have a pretty good idea what we're going to be getting on a true weekly basis from Devin Achane the next 3 to 4 weeks here. So I don't know. We're running low on questions, folks. By the way, you got to get.
So for you, what's the FAAB spend on Achane? Because we've had, for me, Kyren Williams was like, and Puka were both like very league winner potential. If you spend a ton on them, you just might not have the budget to go for Achane, but you should try. What's the FAAB spend on Achane for you?
I think I said around 70% for Jerome Ford. Achane feels more like 50% to me.
I think I said 60 or 50. I think it's over half for me. I don't know if it's quite Jerome Ford levels. I agree that like it's
not Jerome Ford levels, even though he's a much more exciting player than Jerome Ford. Just the role is a little too uncertain for that.
Mm-hmm. It could be very well that he is like James Cook, like in that James Cook, you called this pretty well in the preseason. Really Chase Edmonds-y usage from this guy. Cook is really good, but I know heading into this past game, I don't think it changed. He was 4th on his team in red zone carries behind the quarterback, behind the backup running back, and behind the 3rd string running back. He is a great back between the 20s. We could see that kind of usage for Achane, which is like 10 carries, 88 yards. But if he gets taken down at the 5, he's not the next guy in. So I agree. I mean, it's still like, to me, it's like 60%. I think Kyren, for season long, I still think I'd take like Kyren and Jerome Ford by a small amount.
We have a weekly viewer with, this is more of a comment than a question. And Elia, is that how you say your name? He's in a lot of our chats, a very loyal reader and follower of Rotoworld. I think he's basically trying to force us to reckon with the Arizona Cardinals, who have now overachieved 3 straight weeks. Josh Dobbs hasn't been a huge part of that in the box score. He has been a huge part of it in keeping the offense on schedule, not turning the ball over, making enough plays when they needed him to, doing some stuff with his legs the past 2 weeks. What are the Cardinals, like, is this just, are they actually better than we thought, or is this just like the weirdest running hot we've ever seen? And I'm still not really super flexing Josh Dobbs. So I think he has 2 total touchdowns amidst this really, really hot start for the Cardinals. He has 3 total touchdowns, one of which was on the ground. So that does, just tell me your unfiltered thoughts on the Arizona Cardinals, Kyle.
I still think they're pretty bad, though we could maybe adjust our priors slightly. 3 games isn't a ton of data, and they're 1-2 in those games. You know, they I think they covered in all 3 of them. Obviously, they covered the one they won. But I think you pointed out well from more of a fantasy angle what Josh Dobbs is doing, and it's really what he's not doing. He's taken 5 sacks, which is 1 point or 2 point something a game. No, it's like 1.7 a game and has thrown no interceptions. And he's giving maybe a little bit with his legs. He's keeping the team on schedule enough to win potentially low, modest scoring games. I don't find that to be too sustainable. I mean, I don't think it's that sustainable. Josh Dobbs is your quarterback. And more importantly, it's not something that's super useful for fantasy purposes. Like, I'm going to have Jameis Winston ranked ahead of him, even if Jameis Winston is much, much, much more likely to cost his team real life wins than Josh Dobbs.
With Justin Fields, by the way, we called week 3, at least I did, do or die for Justin Fields. He's now deceased by that measure, that very fake metric that I laid out for week 3. Can we keep rolling Justin Fields out there in single quarterback leagues right now, where it seems so hard to believe that a man with this rushing threat is going to remain down in fantasy, but 1 rushing score, 3 passing touchdowns, hasn't eclipsed 216 yards passing, hasn't seemed terribly like he's known what to do with DJ Moore. Are we pulling the plug? Sorry for all the very grim imagery on Justin Fields in single quarterback leagues this week, Kyle. They're playing the Denver Broncos.
I know.
You may have heard just allowed 70 points.
I still think you're probably pulling the plug on him in single quarterback leagues. Like, I don't think he's going to rank as a QB1 for me this week. Maybe he's right there. And if someone is holding 2 quarterback ones, like they got Justin Herbert and Kirk Cousins or whatever, like, sure, he could creep into your lineup. In Superflex, you're still playing him. He's one of the 24 best fantasy quarterbacks for sure. Single quarterback leagues, it's tough. I mean, they're still not designing runs for him. He had, I believe, 3 design runs in week 3. He was averaging north of 5 over the second half of the year last year. Like, and his team, when he does good things, which, like, it's been a struggle. He hasn't played great. Boy, does his team let him down. He had PFF ranked him or graded him as their number 12 passer on the week. I think that's probably high, but I will point out that I watched most of this game while I was writing up blurbs from another game, and he had a gem of a deep ball to DJ Moore, and it's just a catastrophic drop from DJ Moore, who's normally very sure-handed. Man, in the breadbasket, deep outside throw, it slips right between his arms. Then within like a few minutes of that, he has a deep middle throw to Chase Claypool, where it was well defended by whoever the Chiefs safety was or corner was on him at the time. But he gave Claypool a fighting chance, and Claypool is like 6'4", 230, and couldn't go up and bring it down. It was well defended. I'm not going to say you have to come down with that. But when you're struggling like that, you'd really love a teammate to step up and bail you out. Not bail him out. It was a good throw, but pitch in a little bit. And they just cannot get it going. They cannot get the play calling right. They cannot get the play sequencing right. They can't get the receivers catching passes. And on the rare occasions when those things start to come together, then it's like that time is when Justin Fields falls apart. So every play is like a 5-leg parlay for this dreadful team. Yeah, I'm benching him in my single QB leagues.
I'm actually not benching him in single QB this week. I mean, I just said the Broncos aren't going to end up the worst defense of all time. Hot take. And I think they might even end up usable in fantasy by the end of the season. But they're not a top-tier defense right now. The game is, I believe, in Chicago.
I think so.
The whole Chiefs game would have been – the Bears weren't going to win the game, but there was 21-0 when DJ Moore had that drop. And it would have probably been 21-7 very soon after that. That was a total game deflator, game changer, ruined any shot, really, the Bears had at momentum. And it's like feeling like they were in the contest. And I almost we're deep into excuse-making territory here. But that was a really, really game-changing mistake from DJ Moore. And there's just no way I can keep Justin Fields out of the top 12 this week against the defense that just allowed 70 points. Jay asks really one of the burning questions. One, we're running low on information on what are our thoughts on Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. Zach Moss just had 30 carries on Sunday. Jonathan Taylor, in theory, is coming back after this week. That seemed to be the latest update. It's still kind of an information vacuum for Jonathan Taylor. And even if he's healthy, do the Colts want him in their backfield? What do we do with Zach Moss, and who has become an every snap player, as we know, extremely difficult to find that in fantasy? How do we handle the situation with Jonathan Taylor's return looming?
My opinion is that, and the reports were like, maybe I'm really putting on my tinfoil hat, but the wordings are that he would be medically cleared for week 5 or whatever. It was not that he was going to play in week 5. It was that he would come off the PUP list. It is, I think, at least possible that he comes back in the sense of he is cleared, and the team's like, we're not going to play you. We're planning on trading you. That is still our goal. Or he doesn't want to play. Like, there are a lot of outs to him not being an active member of the roster in week 5. So for me, I'm probably firing up Moss, and I'm willing to throw if he's around. He's been known to be a thing for a week or two, so maybe he's not on any of your waiver wires. But if he is, I'm comfortable spending a decent amount on him. I think the odds of Taylor playing in a Colts uniform are less than what the public thinks.
I think, as I said to you on our Sunday night podcast, I do think the odds are increasing with the somewhat surprising 2-1 start. Zach Moss is kind of long since proven to be a role player. It's a gamble in fantasy. I would try to sell Zach Moss while he still has this perceived value right now. Hard, even if Zach Moss somehow stayed the Colts starter,
this is a better point, I think.
I would say it's hard to believe like he'll ever be more valuable than he is at this exact moment. It's not without risk. It does feel like a trade chip that you cash in to me.
To put it bluntly, even if Zach Moss stays as the Colts locked-in starter, he's always going to be Zach Moss.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So, by the way, Elia is chugging chili oil and starting Justin Fields in week 5. We got a trade question from Joseph. Deal Keenan Allen, who just had 20 targets on Sunday, Travis Kelce, who had a lot going on Sunday, and Alvin Kamara for Devontae Adams, DJ Moore, Pierce, and Palmer. I'm not sure if that's Alec Pierce or Damian Pierce.
One would assume Damian, and this could be Trey Damian. Palmer or Josh Palmer, but
it's definitely Josh Palmer, we're going to be getting a lot of questions about this week with Mike Williams out for the season with torn ACL. He seems to be comfortably ahead of Mike Williams on the depth chart. A lot of name brand players in this trade. What do you tell Joseph?
Yeah, give me the Keenan Kelce Kamara side. I think like the other side, Devontae Adams is probably the best player of all of the 13 names in this thing, but Kelce isn't far behind, and frankly, Keenan is not far behind.
It's true.
And getting even closer with Mike Williams banged up. He's done for the year. So after that, there is a gap to DJ Moore, who I like, but I just talked about how dysfunctional this team is. And after that, there is another gap to Dameon Pierce, who the team doesn't actually look that bad, but they are surprisingly comfortable with airing it out in losing efforts. They're not doing the thing that we kind of really get frustrated with, which is even though we're down 14, we gotta stay on schedule. They're throwing it. They are throwing it a lot, and he doesn't catch passes. They're not putting him in goal line situations. I think he finally scored last week, but he's not high on the red zone usage list. Give me the side with probably 3 studs, if not 2.
Yeah. Devontae is not the clear runaway best player in the state. He's probably the best player, but by far 2 of the top 3 are Allen and Kelce. That'd be giving up way too much value. I'm not even sure like what the exact goal of this trade would be. Maybe like if you're feeling a little uncertain about Alvin Kamara, you want a more certain option and Dameon Pierce, but Dameon Pierce has of course been anything but certain. Maybe you just really want more depth, but Joseph, I'm not trying to like knock your trading skills, Joseph. I just not even clear like what the goal of this trade would be. I think you need to stand pat and maybe just work on what kind of concept you're trying to do for your team. Chad asks, is there any chance Andy Dalton strong play keeps Bryce Young off the field once cleared? Is Dalton worth it? I don't think so. I think that they're committed to the bit of developing Bryce Young. Do you have a counter take to that, though, Kyle?
Nope. I mean, I think there's maybe an argument that Dalton is capable enough that they're willing to give Bryce the second week. So I know Rappaport said it's a 1 or 2 week injury, and this past Sunday was week 1 of that. Maybe he comes back. I think maybe if they trotted Zach Wilson out there, he gets crushed. They're like, Bryce, we really need you out here, buddy. Get that ankle right. Maybe it's enough to keep him like split that hair and keep him out for the second week. But also he's a rookie quarterback. Keep him. You're not winning the Super Bowl this season. You probably should have just kept him out in the first place anyways. So it definitely doesn't like flip once cleared. I'm not even sure it makes a big difference on the timing of when Bryce comes back in terms of like, is he 80% healthy, 100%? I don't think it even makes that much of a difference.
Paul has like kind of like the classic. He's ended up with 2 elite quarterbacks. It hurts into looking to trade one of them. I would say, Paul, you do have to trade one of them. Not that I'm breaking any news to you. It's just too much wasted value on your bench with 2 every week starters at quarterback. I would look to trade Tua still, just because of the injury history. I think if you're looking for tiebreakers on who to cash in a trade, Tua is still the riskier option. But what is your take, Kyle?
See, I think we disagree on how much we think the Dolphins are good. I don't. I'm all in on Tua. I have honestly Tua basically across the board this year. But people forget
this really isn't that dissimilar to how the Dolphins ran to begin last year. They have
they
stretches
were
where
really
they've run
good.
very hot, but people are conveniently leaving out the stretches where they did not run very hot in the middle of last. Even when Tua was healthy, I do think it's a more well-oiled machine this year than it was last year, obviously. But I don't think it's anywhere close to proving the commodity that Jalen Hurts is this way, especially since Jalen Hurts gets home for fantasy points in 2 different ways. But give us your pro Dolphins propaganda here.
Yeah, I just think that people are going to continue to doubt the Dolphins. I think they are a proven commodity. I think they will be one of the, if not the most efficient offenses in the NFL. They have an extremely high pass rate. And when they get the running backs involved, it's often through the air. So they're not wasting these 1st and 10 cloud of dust type of carries. I think they understand the sort of fundamentals of, maybe they don't view it in this way. Maybe Daniel doesn't view it in an analytics way. I know they have kind of secretly had some analytics hype, and they certainly play like they do. But I think they understand like the cutting edge of football, both from a like scouting perspective in a way that like we don't understand, but in a way where we're like, oh, play action pre-snap motion boosts your expected value of your plays by like 20% each. They do that at the like one of the highest rates in the league. So to me, I think this is as well oiled of a machine and will stay that way as we'll see this year. And I think people are going to perennially undervalue this team because they can't keep, quote, getting away with it. I think they can. And I think you will get more out of trading Hurts than you will out of Tua, because I personally probably believe in Tua in the more he will continue to put the numbers up than anyone else.
The Chargers and the Broncos have been 2 of by far the worst defenses in the NFL so far. I mean, playing the Dolphins has had something to do with that for both these teams. It was a little more 2022-y against the Patriots in week 2. Is all I'm saying. And it's clearly a top 5 offense, both from an efficiency and an output perspective. But that people don't want to confront the idea that we may have already seen like the peak of the Dolphins. Well, we've definitely seen the peak. They're not going to score 7.
Yeah.
We have seen the peak of the Dolphins. But I'm still very bullish in the Dolphins, and I need to keep producing. Let's just put it that way. In a lot of my home leagues. Should Mr. ASD trade scary Terry McLaurin and Baker Mayfield for Deshaun Watson? This is a weird trade because the quarterback, he wants a quarterback upgrade. Here? Yeah, he wants a quarterback upgrade, but I would just still keep, even with the question marks, I'm probably just keeping the receiver and like grinding the wire for quarterback matchups. What do you think?
Yep. Totally agree.
He has also Trevor Lawrence. So hey, what's up, Mateo? How you doing, man? Got some gremlins there in your Avi. Am I wrong for thinking the interest in Moss is a mistake? Since I'm not quite sure what Chad is getting at here. Sorry, Chad. I pulled up your question where I didn't entirely understand it.
I think you're just saying the absence of Anthony Richardson is boosting the Moss stock. I mean, maybe, but for me, it's not about. 30 carries. That is pretty sick. And I don't think he'll get that regardless of who the quarterback is next week. They also went into overtime and had 3 drives in overtime. The reason they got 3 is because the drives kind of stalled. Point being, they had a lot of extra plays they got to run. But to me, it's about his share of the backfield. It's the fact that they gave Trey Sermon 5 carries, I believe, to his 30. He's like 80+% snap share kind of guy. That's what I care about. Of course, I would love for his team to be like, sort of, Minshew kind of reminds me of like a better version of like late career Ben Roethlisberger, where he can keep the chains going, but it's a lot of short stuff. And he probably plays maybe a little more wild than Ben did, but it makes Zach Moss into like that Najee Harris that we saw then and not the Najee Harris we're seeing now. So maybe it's sort of juicing the numbers a little bit, but it's not juicing the share of the backfield, the snap share, the target share. Those are legit numbers. And that's kind of what I'm falling back on.
Mateo does have an actual question about one of our summer darlings, Denny Carter.
Not mine, buddy.
Well, Denny Carter, so he talked about Samaje Perine many times over the summer. Has he entered the drop zone, Kyle Dvorchak?
Yeah, 100%. Like
he has. He's the classic kind of guy where he was a fun summer concept. We didn't entirely know.
This fun? This was the most boring summer concept.
Well, he's a fun summer concept.
Passing down back
as a late round guy who's going to catch 5 to 6 passes a week. Kind of like is like free money on your bench, I would say, or free money in the late rounds of your leagues. But he's the kind of guy where the upside is so limited that, if you don't see it immediately, you need to pivot very quickly. And we haven't seen it whatsoever. He's an easy drop, especially buys beginning in week 5. You can't be keeping guys like Samaje Perine on your bench at this point. Justin has a question. He has to make a move at running back since Eckler and Aaron Jones are out. They could both be back next week, Justin. Should you move Brian Robinson to pick up someone like Achane or try to trade for Ford? Or I think you can honestly sit tight. I think both those guys should be back. Well, Austin Eckler actually might not be back to week 6. They have one more game and they have a bye. Yeah. Does he need to make a move, Kyle, at running back, Justin?
No, you're perfectly fine with Brian Robinson, Jerome Ford, and Bijan. That's a good, perfectly fine starting running back room.
No, he wants to pick up. He's trying. You should try to add Devin.
You were good with Brian Robinson and Bijan, the Robinsons. You are perfectly fine with that. I mean, I guess I would take Ford over Brian Robinson rest of season. So I guess I'd make that move. But outside of that,
you can't drop Brian Robinson. There's way too much value to drop, of course.
So you take Brian Robinson over Jerome Ford rest of season? Because I'd go the other way.
Yeah, I would, just because we have more information there. Jerome Ford is still a bit of an information vacuum, even though he outsnapped Kareem Hunt 40-14. We just don't entirely know the end game for that Browns backfield, where we've seen pretty clearly, I think, how Brian Robinson is going to be used. It is very frustrating that even though he's basically stolen all of Gibson's work, he can't steal all the snaps, which is limiting his upside a bit. But I think we have a pretty firm handle.
You can't play this guy in passing situations. Like, it's just not who he is. Like, he's a 50% of snaps and like 70% of running back carries guy. But on a team that's not going to score and will not throw him the football, that's why I agree with you that like Ford is a much lower floor. If Kareem Hunt is like the starting running back in week 9, not that shocking of an outcome. But for me, Brian Robinson is lots of touches, relatively empty calories. I think, though, there has to be like a receiver or backup quarterback on your bench you could be able to cut, because I'd love to be able to have Robinson and Bijan and Ford or Achane. Like, having that trio, yeah.
Yeah, and just I don't see an urgency for a move, though. Aaron Jones should be back this week. And at worst, Austin Eckler's going to be back in week. So that is kind of an eternity in fantasy. It's so hard to wait.
You could lose, 3 games between.
Aaron Jones will be back, though. I think Aaron Jones is going to be back this week. Drop Josh Reynolds. I think you can probably drop Josh Reynolds.
Yeah.
Would you rather drop Josh Reynolds or is the Ertz scam over, by the way?
Might be winding down. He only ran around in like 2/3 of the team's dropbacks last week, which was down from the previous 2 weeks. His target share was down, but it wasn't like they were all of a sudden really forcing the Trey McBride issue. McBride's stats didn't really change. So I'm just going to take that as part of the ebb and flow of a season. In a game where they're actually winning too, so they didn't have to throw as much. I would hold on to Ertz, assuming like tight end. You
don't even have to hold it. What I would tell Mateo is he's 0-3. Most of these guys are pretty limited upside guys. You can really get into churning your bench this week, is what I would say.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, you should be definitely churning your bench to find some source of juice for this team, some spark for this team. John Reynolds is like the perfect drop candidate. Honestly, with both of these tight ends, perfectly fine. If there is another like good upside shot you can pull off of the waiver wire, drop one of them.
Jay has a question about Calvin Ridley, who we anointed with elite fantasy oils after week 1. Now he's had back-to-back duds. What do we tell people about Calvin Ridley, who one of the most controversial summer players? It seemed like case closed in week 1. Not only bad games back-to-back for him, back-to-back bad games for the entire Jaguars offense. Calvin Ridley had a very bad drop in week 3. What do we tell people about Calvin Ridley and this scuffling Jaguars offense?
Yeah, I think for Calvin Ridley, I'm still not particularly concerned with him. He actually saw his route rate go back up in week 3, because week 2, he seemed, just based on the eye test, very banged up on a number of situations, but he wasn't on the practice report. So it seems like that stretch of Sunday to Wednesday did him fine, and he was back to a full route rate, just shy of a 20% target share, and still saw almost 40% of the team's air yards. That's good usage numbers. To me, that's not what I'm worried about as much. Like we said, week 1 is probably an exaggeration of what his role will be, but these past 2 weeks, the usage looks good. I'd be fine if that's what we got out of him. It's about the offense. I still think Trevor Lawrence is good. He was an incredible prospect and was really good last year. He was like 10th in EPA and top 12 in CPOE. A lot of the nerd metrics liked him. And that tracks with who he was in college, right? It's not like it came out of nowhere. Not a good start though, Pat. Because like if you
not popping in anything right now.
No, he is flailing in most of the metrics. But like, how do you weigh that 3-game sample versus last season? And you still have to count his rookie season. I think it's mostly worth throwing in the garbage, but not 0 worth throwing in the garbage. He made some bad boneheaded plays. Do you think they bounce back? Because that's the real question about Calvin Ridley, because he's fine in terms of usage. Not elite, but pretty good.
The reason they probably bounce back is still the division. I mean, the Texans are overachieving through 3 weeks, but they're not a huge impediment to the Jaguars stabilizing and seizing control of this division. The Titans are kind of like the perennial, like, oh, we wrote off the Titans yet again, and now they're 9-4. But they are just not looking like they have that in them this year.
No, they don't,
Colts
man. They're
are
done.
Still someone's winning this division at like 9-8 again. And the Jaguars have at least a 33% shot at that. If we don't count the Titans, I would say maybe I would count the Texans more than the Titans at this point.
I would too.
The Jags at a minimum have a 33% shot of winning the division. It's probably more like 40%, which sounds like damning with faint praise, but they're going to figure it out. Julian wants to know about trading Raheem Mostert and Devontae Smith for A.J. Brown. I have an obvious answer here, but what is yours, Kyle?
I assume take the best player in the trades guy is going to take the best player, and I agree with you.
Yeah, this one, Mostert, the injury history, he now has a 1B back in his backfield. Maybe he'll just fully Wally Pippen. We talked about kind of the realistic outcome for Devin Achane, maybe maxing out at 10 to 12 touches a week. Maybe he's just too good and it ends up more like 16 to 18.
Yeah, even if he gets 15, 16 in that range and he starts taking passing downs work away from Mostert, that could be where we're talking about Mostert as not as efficient as Achane, still efficient, but he's not going to be, Achane's just probably a better runner. So you're talking 10 and 12 carries. What if he doesn't get the goal line work? What if he doesn't get passing downs work? There are outs to him. Sorry to cut you off, but I like what you're saying. Yeah. There are outs to him sort of tapering off pretty quickly with how good Achane looks. And Jeff Wilson may be coming back to steal goal line work or pass blocking work.
And just even if Raheem Mostert kept up what he's done the past week or two, it's an RB2 and a borderline wide receiver 1 for a high-end wide receiver 1. It'd be nice for A.J. Brown to break out of his slump tonight, but it's still by the letter of the law, it's a fairly easy trade to make. Raheel does have a question about tonight. Which quarterback should start? Matthew Stafford, Joseph Burrow, or Baker Mayfield? What do you think, Kyle, about this evening?
I think I'm going Burrow.
I have Burrow ranked the highest still. Stafford is the safest. I will say we're going to get some volume out of Stafford. The thing about Stafford's hot start is that it's been an unsustainably low touchdown rate. Maybe he's running unsustainably hot from an efficiency and compiling perspective, but the way he's played, you would normally have at least 3 or 4 touchdowns. I think he has 2. Really, really oddly low touchdown rate. Bengals defense is pretty good. But Stafford is definitely safer tonight than Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, though, anytime he takes the field, has top 4 or 5 upside. I haven't seen it yet this year, and he seems very, very hurt. But I would say Matthew Stafford tonight, but there's a pretty good argument to be made for Joe Burrow. I'm going Joe Burrow. It's too hard.
So you said you had Burrow ranked.
Yeah, I know. I'm talking myself in and out of things.
Yeah, here. I don't know who reported it, but we got a report as we were getting on the show that he's playing. Like you said, if he's playing – top 5, number 1 overall, weekly upside. You're playing him. If he's playing, you're playing him. And we live with the consequences of that.
He is still in that range where he's not you don't stream when you have Joe Burrow. If he's active, you play Joe Burrow, even though I just really thought about it because of his health. I think this man will get 10 points from Kyren Williams tonight. He's playing every snap. Who do you know off the top of your head, who is the Rams' backup running back right now?
Is it Ronnie Rivers?
It might be Ron Rivers, actually. That sounds right. But
I think it is. Either that. I don't think it's Zach Evans. I'm pretty sure it's Ronnie Rivers.
Whoever it is didn't touch the ball in week 2, is all we know. I believe Kyren Williams, I don't know if he came off the field for a single snap. And that might not be the rest of season plan, but we haven't seen any evidence of a counter plan other than the only data point we've gotten since last week is them trading who should have been his backup in Cam Akers. If you're playing every snap, there's basically no way you don't get 10 PPR points. There's just it's almost a mathematical impossibility. You could argue that says more about PPR than it does Kyren Williams, but I like PPR, by the way. Thorbear down 11 versus Hurts and Evans. He needs to start 2 of A.J. Brown, DeAndre Swift, T. Higgins. This is a really interesting one. Standard scoring, not your standard PPR scam, Kyle. Who are you telling Thor to start tonight?
I think it's Higgins and A.J. Brown for me. I'm very skeptical of what we see from Swift. I think the best case scenario is just a true 50-50 split on a team that uses its quarterback to run, uses quarterback successfully at the goal line. Whereas I think for Higgins, if he capitalizes on all the freaking air yards he's seen, he's got like 2 100-yard games and 3 touchdowns. So I'm going to take the like big play wide receivers who in any given sort of drive situation can be the entirety of their team's offense, because you're definitely a dog in that you're facing Jalen Hurts. And down.
Sam Ellis is a really interesting waivers question about dropping Jalen Warren for Josh Palmer. Jalen Warren, people might hear Jalen Warren like, why would I drop Jalen Warren? Like they keep saying his role's going to grow. He's definitely threatening Najee. I do think with Jalen Warren, it could be one of those weird situations where he's making a big impact in fantasy, but it's in that how he craters someone else's value and he's not creating enough of his own. Again, buys starting next week.
Like the 2020 Tony Pollard schedule where
exactly.
Like he ruined Zeke, but he actually wasn't that good for fantasy purposes.
Buys starting next week, injuries starting to mount. What do you say about dropping Jalen Warren? And then in the specific instance for Josh Palmer.
Yeah, person, which is great for us, helps us sort of diagnose the situation, says who's more future upside. To me, it's very clearly Jalen Warren, because I think you're probably right. The way this season plays out in the majority of the simulations of our universe is that Jalen Warren does exactly what you said, and he is a thorn in the side of Najee Harris, but never really amounts to much more than like, PPR flex type of guy. But there are plenty of times, not a majority, but plenty of times where at some point they have to give up the Najee ghost and they finally like start playing Jalen Warren more. That's an elite fantasy outcome. I just don't see us getting that with Josh Palmer. He's a like career backup level receiver who maybe he slips into that number 2 role, but I do think at some point Quentin Johnston will come for him. It's probably not this week, but we're talking about future upside. So for me, Warren has the future upside of like 2.5 down back. Najee's never going to get eliminated, but he could flip.
That's a perfect diagnosis of the situation. I mean, where it might not ever happen with Jalen Warren, but there's still the path for him getting there, like really easy to see. Like it exists. He could get more and more valuable with each passing week. Josh Palmer, we've already seen probably his ceiling. It hasn't happened. He's playing ahead of Quentin Johnston, but one of the reasons they drafted Quentin Johnston is they didn't want someone like Josh Palmer to still be an every snap player. And that like Josh Palmer, we've already seen peak Josh Palmer, and it wasn't that valuable in fantasy. We have not seen peak Jalen Warren. We might never see peak Jalen Warren this season, but it's worth betting on a lot more than peak Josh Palmer. Real quick, we can get 20 PPR points from Puka Nacua tonight. I say we definitely are. We are Legion. We are Puka Nation.
I'm going to say no, but that's because on any given week, I don't know if you'll ever see a wide receiver projected for median 20 points. But if you were to ask me this week, who is most likely to get 20 PPR points, Puka would be on the short list of about 5 guys.
Yeah, Puka, he's the best player in the league. Let's just be real. Saif, hopefully I pronounced your name correctly, has a trade question. Should he deal Gibbs, Goddard, and Tank Dell for Garrett Wilson and Jacobs? Really interesting trade. He owns Sam Laporta. That's why he's okay trading Dallas Goddard. What do we tell Saif, Kyle?
I don't want to be taking on these like talented players on awful teams. I think I'm taking on these talented players on awful teams, especially like to me, the difference between Laporta was legit good. The difference between him and Goddard is probably not that far because Laporta is really good. And Gibbs, once David Montgomery comes back, which I think is going to happen this week, the early season usage was not good. Give me Garrett and Jacobs. Ooh. Please get Kirk Cousins to New York.
It's a textbook trade to make. It really is. You're selling kind of high on Gibbs and Tank Dell. You might be selling low on Gibbs, I guess. But it seems like kind of a sell high on Gibbs and Tank Dell. And again, that doesn't mean they won't remain valuable, but there's pretty good odds they are both at their highest perceived value. Dallas Goedert's very good. But we've been waiting for like that final Dallas Goedert step to come for 2 or 3 seasons. He's so tantalizingly close to becoming like a top 3 or 4 tight end every week. He's never quite gotten there. He is off to a poor start. Garrett Wilson is the most ceiling in this entire group. Josh Jacobs has probably had his worst 3 games of the year. You could lose the trade if it's just a disaster year for the remaining 14 games for the New York Jets. And if Josh Jacobs is out of gas. But this is like a classic, like by the letter of the law, you make this trade. And I'd say you make it like fairly quickly. Even it's not like he's giving up nothing, but by textbook, you make this trade. Who would you drop for a shot on Palmer? I don't know if I drop any of these guys for Josh Palmer, Kyle, but I also want to ask you about JSN, who my summer fears was that it didn't really matter how good JSN was. He wasn't going to be as good as DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I would say that is manifesting through 3 weeks. But what do you say about JSN?
Yeah, they just seem really hell-bent on only using him as like, let's design this guy touches within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. And we're not doing that, targeting other guys. Like you said, I'm still not dropping any of them because I was like, I'm just not doing the Palmer thing, especially with the guys you have. If you were like desperate for, I don't have any flex options. Like I'm going to be ranking Palmer ahead of, I don't know about Dotson, but definitely JSN in like my weekly week 4 rankings. But I just don't know what the long-term outlook is for like, if you're playing Josh Palmer in the flex in the first round of the fantasy playoffs, like probably not winning. Like that's not the recipe to building a championship fantasy roster. It's the recipe to getting you through a few weeks at the flex position. So, and you're fine at receiver right now, so you don't need that. So I'll take all the guys on your bench right now. If I had to pick one, it would actually be Charbonnet for me. He's just not going to be a thing while Ken Walker is healthy. Ken is so good.
Chad has a dynasty question he's been trying to get answered here. 1 QB league lacking depth. Do you trade Jalen Hurts for maximum value or trade Anthony Richardson? Well, his current hype value, I would say it is possible Anthony Richardson will never be more valuable than he is right now in dynasty leagues. It's also possible he's at the beginning of an absolutely amazing 5 to 6 year run as a dual threat quarterback. Who should Chad trade, Kyle?
I kind of will go with trade Anthony Richardson in this one. I talked about in season long trading Jalen Hurts. That's because I really believed in the other quarterback, which is Tua. I kind of agree. Yeah, you can offload sort of a lot of risk by trading Anthony Richardson here, whereas like we have a really high degree of certainty that we know what Jalen Hurts is. So I'll say trade Anthony Richardson.
It does seem like it's so hard to trade the unknown upside of a player like Anthony Richardson.
It's a really like, it could be anything, even Jalen Hurts.
But it's one of those things exactly, yeah, where that's how you win a dynasty league is trading someone where we just don't know the outcome of their career. And they could go south very, very quickly. So I think, yeah, you definitely make that trade. Gaunch. Wow, 13. Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Pacheco, or Devin Achane. I'm not sure what the question is here exactly. I guess like who to start. What do you think, Kyle?
Achane. Chiefs don't even. I'm not sure they know who Pacheco is. I think he scored this week, but also so did CeeDee.
He did score this week.
So did Jarek. Right? Did all 3 of the running backs score this week?
Jarek scored 2 touchdowns. All 3 running backs did score, and the Bears. So the Chiefs merciless beatdown of the Chicago Bears.
Yeah. So like he's a true like 2 down. He gets some passing down work, but I don't even know if that sustains with McKinnon probably getting more work down the stretch. He's like a 2 down back on an offense that doesn't run the football. Give me Achane, and then for the next one, Allen or Tua. You finally broken me. Obviously, this one's Allen.
Yeah, it's still Allen. I think that some people might like kind of panic about the more station to station Josh Allen we've seen the past 2 weeks. I actually do think it's a good thing because it just means in the weeks where he doesn't need to go like insane psycho hero ball, he has a different style he can play that establishes a pretty nice floor, and the ceiling's always going to be there. And we know games like this week coming up against the Dolphins where he might need to go like Superman mode. Like he's not going to not do that. And I think all it really does is stabilize Josh Allen's already high floor without damaging his ceiling at all. So I'm still in on what might be the new Josh Allen. Nico Collins or Tank Dell? Very interesting question. Nico Collins finally, quote, had a down game in week 3 after a strong 2-game stretch to begin the season. Tank Dell has gone off back-to-back weeks without Noah Brown. Still have no idea why Noah Brown was preventing Tank Dell from getting on the field. But who do we like as the most valuable Texans receiver rest of season? Nico Collins or Tank Dell?
I'm going to say it's still Nico Collins. That's,
I think so too.
Talk about in previous shows, but like all of this is just us adjusting our priors, and Tank Dell has made us heavily adjust our priors. But so is Nico. Nico's also looking really good. So up until last week, like the first 2 weeks were very strong usage. And it's not like his role changed last week. It was just a Tank Dell takeover game. So I'm going to still say Nico. And really, it's just because both of their stocks have gone up tremendously since preseason.
Nico's role seems a little more locked in. Whereas Tank Dell, we could still get like, man, Tank Dell had 2 amazing games. I don't know why the Texans aren't featuring him. It just doesn't seem quite as locked in yet. And strange things happen with rookies all the time. That's not very like a logical answer, but it just seems Nico Collins' role is set in cement. We don't entirely know if Tank Dell's role set in cement. Let's see here. Any more questions? Mateo, he is wondering about Russell Wilson. Mateo, how'd you end up with Russell Wilson as your quarterback in a 1 QB league? But on the waiver, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Danny Jones, Mac Jones. The only one I really see there that I might consider dropping Russ for is CJ Stroud. What say you, Kyle?
Yeah, probably for this week, I'm still sticking with Russ. I think Russ has been running good on getting like Marvin Mims 60-yard touchdowns every week or whatever, but he is actually like performing really well in some advanced stats. Just his team's defense has been getting blown up and his team's been making a bunch of dumb mistakes and penalties and stuff. They look shockingly similar to what they did last year, but he's not playing like he was terrible last year. And he's actually playing well this year for his low.
He's playing better, but everyone's like, because, when you lose 70-20, people are going to make Russell Wilson jokes, even though it was entirely on the defense. But I will say it's not like it was 0% his fault. And just that the offense can't string together drives where they've strung together a few solid halves. They haven't come close to stringing together an entire like solid game. It's been a very uneven operation still for the Broncos offense. And really, like, they come out when the game is more scripted and more predictable in the first half and look pretty good. And then every week after the break, it seems like this thing just goes off the rails, kind of like what happened last year. And so I'm sure some of it's Sean Payton's fault, but he's stabilized in the box score where I don't think we're anywhere particularly close to prime era Russ, though. And that it's like way too early to say, like, the Broncos stink, but at least Russ is fixed. I don't think that's the case. He could be. They're working on him at least.
It's better. Like last year was unwatchable football. Now there's something there. I think maybe this is sort of what things would have looked like in Seattle for Russ if they had more bad defenses, like they had the Legion of Boom defense, where if you were forcing Russ to drop back all these more predictable times, like he can't just bank on like, oh, easy play action and use my incredible deep ball skills to beat the opponent. They're having these drives that are, if they don't hit Marvin Mims or Cortland Sutton for a deep ball, the drive's dead. Like that was some of the stuff that Pete Carroll was able to avoid and sort of mask in Seattle through his defense, but in some ways through his offense that we hated and now proved to be kind of prescient. I still think it could have been better.
Pete won the argument.
Pete won the argument. And I think what we're seeing now is like, oh, Russell Wilson wasn't as like that team was so poorly coached last year that this is what it should have looked like. And it still doesn't look perfect. It should have looked better last year, but Pete was still masking flaws and his defense was still supporting Russ in a way that we're not getting this year. So the flaws are still there, but this isn't a team coached by a guy who just does not know how to run a competent offense.
Time for 2 more quick questions. Then unfortunately we got to bounce. Mikey wants to know T. Higgins or Tutu Atwell tonight. Joe Burrow is apparently active, Kyle. You need to get on that blurb.
T. Higgins, but it's a little uncomfortably close. But like we said with Burrow, we said Burrow's playing, you start him. It's T. Higgins, you start him, I guess.
And like you were making this point earlier about, and it could even be Jalen Hurts, where you're talking about the outcome of Anthony Richardson. I kind of feel like this is a different situation, and it could even be T. Higgins when you're talking about Tutu Atwell's stat line. Like
sure,
I'm still comfortably playing T. Higgins. One final question here. Brandon Cooks and JSN on the bench. Should he drop one of them? So definitely he needs to be adding Achane. I think this is kind of, to me, is Brandon Cooks droppable question. Is Brandon Cooks to the point where we are cutting bait after 3 injury-marred and non-productive first 3 weeks of the Dallas Cowboys?
Yeah, I'm fine cutting Brandon Cooks. I mean, I think he's like more playable than JSN in week 4 or whatever, but I assume you're fine. If you're desperate, even then, no.
I'd say both are cuttable. I don't want to cut JSN. I will say JSN, though, you're going to be forced to make a decision soon on JSN. Ideally, you give him at least 1 more week, but decision time is coming for JSN with the buys and the injuries. Brandon Cooks, a guy who he was so consistent, but man, like when these guys like tell you something, like Brandon Cooks last year, the injuries, the lack of production, even if it's only 3 games carrying over to a much better team in offense, it seems like Brandon Cooks is trying to tell us something, and it is that he is done. And
I'm in for that, yeah.
And we are unfortunately trying to tell you something, and that we are done with this chat. Thank you so much for your questions. Please check out Kyle's Waiver Wired article up on the site at rotoworld.com. My free ranks will be up Tuesday. The article coming out Thursday. They're updated all week as we go. A lot of big injuries this week again. Keep it locked to rotoworld.com for all the latest injury news and updates. For Kyle Dvorchak, I'm Patrick Daugherty. Thanks for listening. We will be back next week at 6 p.m. Eastern.